Sanders, and this is my doctor, Dr. Shire. And today I'm going to be interviewing him, so I'm going to get to know a little bit more about Dr. Shire, his role in the trial, and we're recording live from the hospital. Okay. So thank you for coming today.
My pleasure.
Okay, so my first question I have for you, how did you get started in stem cell and why?
So this goes a little bit further back, all the way back to when I was in high school. Back then, I always wanted to be a comic book artist.
Oh.
But I was volunteering for the American Cancer Society, and my job was to drive underserved patients to their hospital appointment because they don't have transportation.
Yeah.
My mother was the coordinator, so I was the de facto driver. And from that experience, I really wanted to do something more and to really help these people than just driving them to the hospital.
Yeah.
So that's what started my interest in my pursuit of going to medical school.
Okay.
And I was very fortunate, and I always wanted to be an oncologist.
Yeah.
But then in medical school, I really fell in love with pediatrics. So going into pediatric oncology seems like a very natural choice. And during my fellowship in pediatric oncology, I started, taking care of patients who undergo stem cell transplant for various conditions. And then just as luck would have it, when I finished my fellowship, we were looking for jobs. And during that time, there were very few positions open around the country. So I started looking into further trainings and fellowship, and I just basically looked up online, and turned out Texas Children's Hospital was looking for someone, and I submitted my resume saying I'm interested to be a fellow in stem cell transplant, just as a school opportunity.
Yeah.
Back then, the program was run by a man called David Paplak, and if you know who David Paplak is, his name is etched in gold in the textbook of pediatric oncology. I was driving home one day and I got this booming, my phone rang, and this booming voice came, "Are you David Shire?" I'm like, "Yes." It's like, "This is David Paplak." And I almost crashed my car inside. And I was like, "Yes, sir." He said, "You're interested in coming here?" I was like, "Yes, sir, absolutely." He says, "I'm flying out tomorrow."
Whoa.
Yeah, so then from that, I went over there, did an interview. Apparently they thought I was good enough for their program, and there it was. And I always tell people that since that day, and then taking care of the transplant and watching this process again, it's the same excitement every single time when I see a patient going through the conditioning regimen, seeing their stem cell working, the sense of joy and accomplishment, and just marvel at this process, just really stick with me. And that's how I become really a transplanter.
Wow. Okay. So when you were in oncology and you saw some patients doing stem cell transplants, were they diagnosed with leukemia?
Yeah, mostly. I did my fellowship in Children's Hospital Orange County. Just for your reference, it's a smaller program, so we transplant about 20 to 30 patients a year, mostly leukemia patients, and some with sickle cell disease and some with other non-malignant disorders. So even though it was very small, it was a wide variety of patients.
Oh, okay. Wow. That's super cool. I didn't know that you started wanting to do oncology. I knew you had your background or your experience was in that, but I didn't know that was when your first interest peaked was in oncology.
Yes. So I always want to be an oncologist from the experience of taking care of these, driving those patients to the hospital and getting their chemotherapy appointment. Then pediatric oncology. Transplant is actually it's a further specialization in pediatric oncology.
Oh, okay.
Because it's such a specialized medicine that there's a couple paths you can get there, but most common is through oncologists who then go on to become stem cell transplant.
Oh, okay.
So that's kind of how I got into this area.
Cool. That's cool to know. And that you got a call from David.
Paplak.
Yeah.
Dr. Paplak, yes. And
that's a cool story.
You can make it up. In fact, during the interview, I was evaluated by a psychologist.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, at the same time.
Wow.
Yeah.
What was that for? And what was that like?
I always joke is that they want to make sure their candidates are good. I remember sitting in dinner, and there's some faculties, and there was a psychologist. And And I joke with that, am I being psychoanalyzed? And he says like a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Texas Children was obviously very, high recognition in the nation. It's a very successful program. So I think they train a lot of people coming through, and maybe they care enough to make sure they want someone they like and someone they felt is a good fit. So they make sure they have like some sort of evaluation of your mental stability or something.
Yeah, because you have an oath, right? Like doctors and nurses.
Yes, yes. When you graduate from medical school, you give the Hippocratic oath.
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay. Wow. So I think I already got the answer to what drew you to this trial. It seems like you like seeing patients going from the conditioning and feeling bad, and you like seeing the recovery and how much they benefit from it. I'm guessing that's what drew you into this trial.
Right. So as everything, sometimes things are never really as well planned or glorious as you think it is, like a perfectly designed. I joined Stanford in 2019. At that time, this trial was still under development. I believe the intended principal investigator was not myself, but I think that person left. We're leaving a space in that role. So looking around, I think they just sort of picked me and sort of carried the ball forward, because we were still in the process of talking to the FDA, going over all their questions, make sure everything's so we sort of picked up from there, and I guess it just went really well. So when the trial actually or open, so they just go ahead and I become the principal investigator. And the side thing is that I do have while my primary responsibility here is for leukemia patient, but one of my first few transplant, and actually what the research I did at Texas was on sickle cell patient and thalassemia patient. So there's always sort of my side passion or a special connection to to patient with sickle cell disease and thalassemia. So it was very nice for me because it breaks from my primary responsibility, but at the same time really sort of utilize everything I've learned in terms of clinical trial designs, managing a clinical trials, all the regulatory stuff, and so it really kind of come together. And I guess I did good enough a job that it then changed me to someone else.
Okay. So principal investigator is technically the role.
Yeah, they call us PI, principals.
So, do you want to talk about the process of the trial a little bit, like simplified, what that looks like?
Sure. Obviously, the trial is open. It's registered on the clinicaltrial.gov. We also, the circle of transplant, gene therapy is relatively small. So just by word of mouth, the words gets out. And then basically, if a patient is interested, they get referred to us. Then we kind of did what we did for you. Like we meet with you, we discuss the trial, make sure you understand the risk and the benefit. We consent them, we do a bunch of testing. And then once you're determined to be eligible for the study, you have to go through this period where you do the red cell exchange with the idea of improving your overall health, getting your body in a better shape. Then the patient, we collect their stem cells with the procedure called apheresis. Once we collect their stem cells, these cells go through rigorous testing, and once they met all criteria, they get manufactured into the gene therapy product. In this instance, the gene correction. And then once they pass a bunch of other set of tests and meeting the release criteria, then we get notified that we're ready to treat the patient. And then we bring the patient into the hospital, they receive strong chemotherapy to make space in their bone marrow so these cells can go back in, then they get infused, and then here we are. We're waiting to see if it works.
Yeah.
Yeah, it will work. We're just waiting now for them to wake up and start taking over your bone marrow.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's a good way of saying how this trial goes in chronological order. I feel like every time someone asks me, I'm just like all over the place. But that is pretty much it.
Yeah.
Thank you for
well,
that.
after you've been grilled by FDA about like 2 months, you're like, I told you.
It's
this way. Yes, there's no other way. We decided it's this way. Yeah.
Okay. And so, what is CRISPR-Cas9? Because that's like the key word that you see in this trial and a lot of other.
Yeah, CRISPR-Cas9 basically is an acronym for a special enzyme. The general name for the enzyme is called endonuclease. So basically they are enzymes that can be paired with what we call a guide RNA, like a guide sequence, to search your genome for the exact same spot as the guide RNA. And then the enzyme will make a cut and removing the genetic material between the matching sequence. And because with this strategy, it's very, people were just intrigued when they discovered this enzyme, when they first, I believe, from plants. It was a defense mechanism. My understanding was that they were able to use this strategy to remove, like, let's say, an invading bacteria and then remove part of their genome, and now the bacteria doesn't have any sort of function. But I was told that story, so you may want to double check. But the idea is that people are fascinated with this idea that, wow, you can actually target specific part of the genome. As you know, a lot of human disease conditions are caused by single nucleotide mutations. So it seems like a very feasible idea to then find a way to correct a mistake, such as sickle cell. Sickle cell disease really is from one nucleotide, or the little pieces that makes DNA, single change in a spot, leading to the subsequent protein made from the gene to be different than the normal one. And that protein, that change of the amino acid from what we call a mistranslation of the original script, cause the hemoglobin to sickle when you are in an environment where the oxygen level is low.
Such a small change.
So it's a small change leading to a bigger change and leading to even more change until it affects your whole body.
Wow.
So if you go back to this beginning and correct that, then this tool, this CRISPR-Cas9, this tool, it allows you to do that.
That's so interesting. That's something that will make such a big difference in your body. The DNA is that intricate.
So yeah, absolutely. I was a genetic major in college. So it's always fascinating how it's so good, right? Your body makes so many copies, and as in your lifetime, divide and divide and divide, faithfully doing its job. But it's not perfect. So when it occurs, something like this happen, and then in patient with cancer, leukemia, that's how it triggers. Usually some important gene that controls appropriate cell growth get disrupted.
I see.
And from that on, sort of snowballs, and they accumulate more and more mistakes until the cell goes out of control. But it doesn't happen a lot. So it's fascinating how the machinery is so good, but yet so simple to change at the same time.
Wow. And thalassemia, beta thalassemia, is that the same as leukemia where there's a disruption, or is it?
No, thalassemia is anemia. So basically, thalassemia patient they don't have the beta globin gene. Sickle cell patient has a abnormal beta globin gene. Thalassemia patient or beta thalassemia patient miss the entire gene or a big chunk of it. So they don't make the beta globin, leading to severe anemia. So they don't sickle, but they have just lower anemia level. But a lot of similar subsequent effect is the same. So because of that, their bone marrow kind of go to hyperdrive, keep working, because the body says we need more hemoglobin, but the bone marrow says okay, but you try, then do the right thing.
So hyperactive bone marrow.
Yes. So then they start turning over a lot of iron, so they have like iron deposit in their body. Also, the chronic effect from the low anemia.
So this trial, it's only for sickle cell patients. This one.
Yes, this one is only for sickle cell.
Okay.
Because remember, we only correct the mutation. We can't replace the whole missing gene.
Okay. So what do you hope comes out of this trial? Like your best case scenario, changes the world. What do you hope?
Yeah. So no, I mean the simple hope is that this works. This achieved our desired intended effect, which is take patients with sickle cell anemia who are affected, turn them into as normal as possible. I think we have many discussions, right? So when we, sickle cell patient, usually do well in the first 2 decades of their life. When they're pediatric, patients, they usually, compliance is better. They sort of accept the fact they take medication, they get used to it, and their body is young, so they don't experience much problem. But more and more, I notice that people their disease gets worse in their second decade, third decade of life. It's when all of a sudden everything they want to do stops, right, or slow down significantly. So my hope is that this works, that that it can be safe, the gene manufacturing process is worked out, so it's very reliable, and we can, take a patient through this process safely, and let them be who they are always meant to be.
Yeah. I know it seems like the first 2 decades, when you're in your 20s, you're just starting out, just want to start your life, but then it kind of puts everything.
Right, and I have other patients very much like you. They are great students with big goals, and all of a sudden they would say, it's getting harder and harder, to go to class, to stay in class, because they are always dealing with, pain crisis, big and small.
Yeah. I know that was kind of the same for me in college. I just noticed every year it was a little bit harder.
I went to medical school in Wisconsin, Milwaukee. So we took care of some sickle cell patient. I just remember I was a medical student in a hospital, and the lady name I still remember, her name's Martina, and then they always say, "Oh, she's back." I'm like, "What do you mean?" I was just a young medical student. I said, "Oh, she has sickle cell. She comes here when she needs food." I'm like, "What?" And she's like, "Oh yeah, she's gonna tell you that she has a lot of pain." And she's here, and by the time, and she will tell us when she's ready to go. Usually it's about a week, and and I just remember watching her walk. I mean, that's not somebody who's well, or she shuffles her way through, and people sort of just label them as frequent flyers and stuff. And that always makes me wonder, like, well, how much of that is because we didn't do a good job, right? And who wants to be in the hospital every few weeks just to be there so they can get their pain under control, and then stock up their free food supplies? It's hospital food. Are you out of your mind?
Yeah, that's a strange comment.
Right, but that is the notion of what people think, that they're a frequent flyer. They just have sickle cells. So that always leaves an impression for me. And I'm just like, it shouldn't be so, right?
Yeah.
It shouldn't be the case. If she doesn't have this problem, what could she be?
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting how some people view sickle cell patients. I don't know. I feel like you're either 50% of the people I meet if I'm in the ER in the hospital want to help and like they're super supportive, and the other 50% I kind of just like I don't know, because not a lot of people know about sickle cell disease.
I'll share with you, even here, right here at Stanford, I was giving a talk to young fellows, both adult and pediatric, about this trial. And some adult fellows stand up and made a comment about, well, this is not impressive. I said, well, transplant for sickle cell works when you have a fully matched sibling. Survival is greater than 90%. And he said, well, these people doesn't have the risk of dying anyway. So the survival 90% is not impressive to me. And I took the opportunity to tell him that there's a difference between not dying and living your life. What you take it for granted, these people do not enjoy.
Yeah.
So we shouldn't measure our success just when the patient is not dead.
Yeah.
We should be asking ourselves that if they are not sick, maybe they're your boss. Maybe they are your colleagues. Maybe they are your city councilmen, right, that do the right thing for the community. Just the fact that they don't die, that they're not going to die tomorrow, therefore you're not impressed with these novel therapies.
Right.
It's short-sighted. It's not very smart.
Yeah. I know when I initially, when I met the previous doctor for this trial, I think I was kind of in that headspace. personally, I was like, well, I'm not super sick, you know, like I can wait. But that was, of course, before everything started to kind of titrate up. And one of my other pain doctors here, she's like, just wait, like you're fine. And I was thinking, but I want better quality of life. Because in 2020, after I graduated, there would have been no way I would have been able to keep a job with how often I was in the hospital and how often pain came on. And I wasn't able to really travel anywhere. Like, as you saw, going to LA, that caused a lot of pain and a super long hospitalization. So it's just, I felt like I couldn't do anything.
This notion of wait for what? You're not gonna, this disease doesn't get better on its own. You know, actually, just to be, you know, people done a survey study about 10 years ago at New York, and they asked patients with sickle cell themselves, what do they understand about their disease? The results were very shocking. The exact number is about 14%, but just to say, less than 20% of patients think sickle cell disease will shorten their lifespan or prevent them from achieving what they want. And about the same amount of parents thought that way too. Which is, to me, it's just that, wow, we don't really do a good job at telling people what they are faced with, what they're dealing with.
What was the age group of this?
Was the age, I think, if I remember correctly, about 12 to about like young, early 20s. So those are teenagers, and actually a sizable of them also believe their sickle cell will get better as they get older, which is absolutely not true. So I don't know, maybe there's some deficiency in medical education, maybe there's deficiency in patient education about telling patients who are, you know, the sickle cell is diagnosed at birth. It's by newborn screening, to prepare people enough and give enough information so that when they reach the appropriate age, they know to seek options, curative options. That would change their life.
I definitely think when I was a teenager, it was always in the back of my mind that it could shorten my lifespan, because that's all my doctors said to me when I was at Sutter, like, just so you know, some sickle cell patients only live to be in their 40s. So that was always on my mind, but I don't think I ever had the conversation of it could get worse as you get older. So when I was in high school and as a teenager, I thought, oh, I could live like this. Like, I don't need a bone marrow transplant. I don't need a stem cell transplant. Like, I could do it just as it is. And like you said, it was just because there's lack of education. And of course, I had to find all this out on my own. Once I started to get worse, I had to figure out what was happening and come here to Stanford to figure out what the next few decades would look like. And it was kind of shocking to not have that information earlier, because it was just like, you know, 40s is around the time you pass away. Just make sure you do what you can until then. Like, take your hydroxyurea, you know, that's it, folic acid.
And the truth is that there are still doctors who believes that kind of thinking. That, no, they're fine, they just take hydroxyurea, why do you want to take the risk of a transplant? You know, I always tell them transplant gets better and better every decade. You know, the toxicity, the way a patient gets through, it's, you know, we are improving every 5 years, and that's public. That data is public. And just like I said, because of my own experience, seeing these patients in the adult hospital coming in with pain crisis and living the way they were, and then seeing kids who are affected severely. I think I shared with you, one of my other very first transplant patients was a young girl with sickle cell disease, and she had a stroke.
You did say that.
Loved to dance, lovely girl, and now I see her YouTube clip of she's a dancer at her church. Amazing, you know. It's like when I saw before I left Florida a few years ago, and they told me that she's taking ballet classes and doing, like, you know, performing for her school, and none of that, the mom said she never thought that would be possible. They were worried about she doesn't have permanent neurological damages from a stroke. So again, living, not dying, and truly living to your full potential,
Yeah.
it's not the same thing.
Right. A really big difference.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I'm super grateful for this child. I'm super grateful.
Well, I'm still holding my breath. I think everything,
Yeah.
all indicators is good,
Yeah.
you know, but, you know, we'll celebrate when we get there.
Okay.
Yeah.
I at least appreciate the opportunity and the opportunity to
I don't
stay.
think I could have a better
Okay.
first patient. It's just
Oh.
because of, you know, who you are,
Yeah.
how thoughtful you are, and, you know, how supportive your family is, and their own experience
Yeah.
really was a great partner for this process.
Yeah. It helps to have the support from you and Alex and everyone. The best team ever. Sorry, I have to look at the camera when I said that.
Yeah, well, you know, it was meant to be, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes I do think that there's things in life that happens you just can't make it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I know, I can tell like when you talk about this stuff that you really enjoy and passionate about it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks. Yeah, I
It's
know.
cool to see and I'm glad you are.
I think some nerd stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I can go on and on about stats, but I don't think this is good materials.
It's okay. Well, those are all of my questions.
Okay.
That's all I have.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming to my show.
Oh.
No, I'm just
You know,
Thank
hope I get a chance to come back
Yeah.
for follow-up.
Definitely.
Good. All right.
All right. Thanks, Dr. Jack.
Of course, anytime. Yeah, anytime.